to make sandwiches. That's her quote. You're saying that this is a lie, that she's wrong?
Senator, we have a number of law enforcement priorities.
Senator Hawley, you're ready.
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, when you were last before this committee, we talked about the tens of thousands, it's actually 420,000 unaccompanied migrant children who have come across the border under your watch. We talked about the reports of the number of these children who have been lost, who have been sold into labor trafficking, into sex trafficking. Since your last appearance, the numbers have grown worse. It now approaches 100,000 children, according to public reports, 100,000 children lost by your department and the Biden administration, migrant children sold into labor trafficking and sex trafficking. Now, your Department of Homeland Security Investigations has the authority to do child exploitation investigations. How many of these kids have you gotten back?
Senator, we actually have prioritized the rescue of children who have been human trafficked. Our role in the immigration process is to, with respect to unaccompanied children specifically, is to turn them over under the law within 72 hours to the Department of Health and Human Services, and that is indeed what we do.
But how many of the children, nearly 100,000 children in the New York, you've read the New York Times reports, I assume, Mr. Secretary.
I have read many reports, Senator Hawley.
But do you know what I'm talking about with the number of children who have been sent to operate heavy machinery, who are not being paid, who are not going to school, who are being denied food, migrant children unaccompanied, who are now in the clutches of labor traffickers? You're familiar with this, right?
That is precisely why I revised our worksite enforcement.
Good. How many of the kids have you gotten back then? 85,000 or more now. Lost contact with. It's been months since you were last here. How many of those children have you rescued? Can you give me a number?
You are conflating issues.
So you can't give me a number. You haven't rescued any of these children. You haven't gotten any of them back.
You are conflating issues and what is within our remit and what is outside of it.
Okay. Well, it doesn't sound to me like this is a priority, and I have to tell you, that's what your own agents tell me as well. A whistleblower from your agency of Homeland Security Investigations has come to me and has said that special agents who are working on child trafficking cases and fentanyl interdiction cases have been pulled off of their investigations and sent to the southern border. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these agents at a time, taken out of the field, taken off child exploitation cases, and sent to the southern border. Here's some of what she said. She said, we're being told to shut down investigations, to go hand out sandwiches and escort migrants to the shower and sit with them while they're in the hospital, and those types of tasks. Mr. Secretary, you're taking special agents away from investigating child traffickers and child exploitation when you've lost tens of thousands of kids to traffickers, and you're sending them to make sandwiches at the border. What is going on?
You are incorrect, Senator.
Are there special agents from HSI at the border?
Senator, we have a number of priorities. We prioritize trafficking in children. We prioritize the fight against fentanyl. We prioritize
Mr. Secretary, you're not answering my question. You're not answering my question. Are there HSI special agents who are currently at the border having been pulled away from other cases? Yes or no?
Combating the fight against fentanyl, yes.
How many agents are currently at the border having been pulled off of their other cases?
To fight the scourge of fentanyl, I'd be very pleased to provide you with that data.
That's not what the special agent is alleging. That's not what she said. She said that they're being taken off of fentanyl interdiction, off of child exploitation cases, off of their other investigations into criminals to make sandwiches. That's her quote. You're saying that this is a lie, that she's wrong?
Senator, we have a number of law enforcement priorities. With the resources
is making sandwiches one of them?
We have, of course not, Senator. We accomplish a tremendous amount.
Is she wrong?
Because of the tremendous talent and dedication of our personnel, including Homeland Security investigations.
Making sandwiches for illegal immigrants. Is she wrong? This is one of your agents. Is she wrong? She says that there are 600 at least special agents pulled off of other cases, sent down to the border to babysit illegal immigrants. Is she wrong?
Senator, our personnel, we use our personnel to achieve the maximum law enforcement objective possible. That is what we do.
And so you're not going to deny it.
And I'm incredibly proud of what our people do
Oh, this is
every
news.
single day.
This is news. Well, I want to thank this brave whistleblower for coming forward and let the record reflect that the Secretary will not deny what she has said, that hundreds of special agents are pulled off of their law enforcement duties all around the country, by the way. Her testimony to me is this happens all around the country and sent down to the border to make sandwiches for illegal immigrants. This is your administration in action. It's a total failure, Mr. Secretary.
That is incorrect.
Marshall, you're recognized for your questions.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Mr. Secretary, do DHS employees have your personal contact information? And how widespread do you believe the distribution of your personal contact information is to DHS personnel?
When you speak of personal information, do you mean outside of the work context?
Your personal contact information, your personal emails.
Senator, I do not distribute that to DHS personnel.
Aside from email and text messaging, do you use any other form of personal electronic communication, such as encrypted message applications that may have errantly received or transmitted communications relating to official DHS business?
Senator, I follow the rules scrupulously.
Is that a yes or a no?
Senator, I follow the rules scrupulously.
Okay. In April, in sworn testimony before this committee, you insisted, and I'll quote you, if somebody errantly sends me an email, my personal email, that should have been sent to my work email. I forward it to my work email. That's what I do. I fulfill my responsibilities scrupulously, and I have 100% confidence in the integrity of the actions. Despite that, a FOIA lawsuit by Americans for Prosperity has uncovered hundreds of pages of records reflecting your personal use of personal email account and cell phone for official DHS business since you assumed the office of Secretary. We sent you a letter on July 13 asking for additional questions on your and your subordinates' adherence to this DHS policy on the use of non-DHS emails, but thus far you've failed to respond to me. Will you commit to getting the answers to our letter?
I'll be happy to look at your inquiry and respond accordingly. What you just articulated is perfect evidence of the fact that I have followed the rules.
And that explains why there's hundreds of pages of records reflecting your personal email account and cell phone for official DHS business?
Senator, you misstate the facts.
I've repeatedly said, don't watch what this White House does. I've repeatedly said, don't watch what this White House says, watch what they do. In May, the Biden administration said when Title 42 ended that migrants would face tougher consequences, and I quote that, tougher consequences if they were caught crossing the border illegally. But just in the last border crossing numbers from this past week, the Biden administration's actions showed that Border Patrol released with no consequence 156,000 migrants into the U.S. in September alone. Mr. Secretary, what are the consequences your administration threatened? From where I stand, the only consequences I see of border crossings is a historic number of crossings and the consequences that the American people are less safe today than they were 3 years ago.
Senator, that is incorrect. Removal and return of individuals under Title VIII of the United States Code is one example of a consequence that we deliver. In fact, in fiscal year 2023, we removed or returned more than 620,000 individuals. Just recently, we announced that we negotiated an agreement with Venezuela for the first time.
So you sent back 10, maybe 200 people, but there's tens of thousands of them are still here. How do you explain the 156,000 migrants in September alone that were released without any consequences?
That is incorrect.
So you didn't release 156,000 migrants into the United States.
Senator, those individuals, when they are processed, they are placed in immigration enforcement proceedings. If they do not qualify for relief, they are subject to removal. If they qualify for relief under the laws that Congress has passed, then they have established a basis to stay in the United States.
What percentage are removed? What percentage have been through the process that are then removed? What percentage of these folks actually have had a hearing? How long is the wait for this hearing? How would you describe to the American people that would make them feel safer today, how you handle that process?
The wait for the hearing is a perfect example of how broken our immigration system is. And in fact, when I first entered federal government here in Washington, D.C., after 12 years serving in California as a federal prosecutor, I learned that the time in between encounter and the final adjudication of an immigration case in 2009 was more than 6 years. So this problem of a broken immigration system has lasted for more than 2 decades. I believe the system was last reformed in 1996, and we are long overdue for a fix.
Would a first safe country asylum policy make us more safe or less safe?
Senator, the issue of a safe third country agreement is a matter of negotiation with third countries.
That's not my question. Would it make us more safe or less safe if there was indeed one?
It is a complex question that cannot be distilled with a simple question and answer as you have posed.
2/3, maybe 70% of the people that are encountered at our borders go through an asylum process. What percentage would you estimate if there was a third country policy in effect, or a first safe country in effect? What percentage would that eliminate from ever even getting to our border?
I think that's a very difficult statistic to
Not a guess.
present.
I mean, you're the Secretary of Homeland Security. You don't have a guess how much of an impact that would make.
I'm not in the guessing business, but I will say this, that when you ask about a consequence in the absence of one, I think it would be important to ask the more than 1.2 million people in fiscal year 2023 who've been returned, removed, or expelled under the law.
Thank you. I yield back.
Great. Thank you, Senator Marshall. Well, I want to thank our witnesses, but I have one more question, and I'm going to ask Director Abizaid this question. The biological threat landscape is clearly growing in complexity. For example, the convergence of biological sciences with emerging technologies such as AI is offering all sorts of opportunities to create bioweapons. So my question for you, Director, is due in part to the pandemic, we're seeing biolabs spring up all over the world right now. And I, as well as many other experts, are worried that they're not being built to or operated according to appropriate safety standards. So I'd like you to address the committee as to what threats do these weak lab safety and security practices overseas pose to our homeland security? What should we be thinking about? What should we be doing?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Senator. This is something that we work closely with our colleagues at NCBC on to, one, try and understand the threat environment, and then two, what kind of protections would best protect against it. Most of what we see today would be at a level of sophistication that the terrorist actors that we follow would not be able to immediately leverage for their own purposes. You mentioned technologies like AI significantly increasing that threat, that capability over time. And I think especially as next generation models of AI come into play, that's going to be something that we'll need to be concerned about. And so regulatory frameworks or different kinds of protections on some of those models that protect against bad actors getting access to the most dangerous kinds of information to assist their capabilities is going to be important. As we look at lab security, one of the things that NCBC is working with its partners on is trying to expand the scope of its monitoring program beyond the sort of high sophistication labs to some of these lower sophistication labs that you mentioned that are of concern.
Great. Well, thank you.
Sarah Paul. Director Wray, as you mentioned earlier, the FBI has concluded with moderate confidence that the virus leaked from the lab in Wuhan. The intriguing thing is that if I were to say that, as I did, and others said this for over a year and a half, Facebook actually suppressed that knowledge, suppressed its spread, and its ability to be transferred from their users. Whether or not they did that at the behest of the FBI or the DHS is eventually going to come out in the court case, but it is a big deal. I've met with the FBI, and one of the things I'm interested in is trying to get people on both sides of the aisle to be interested in the possibility that what happened in Wuhan could happen in the United States. It could happen in 20 different labs around the world. It could happen with nefarious actors. It's something we should be concerned with, the idea of making and creating viruses that are more dangerous than occur in nature. One thing that would help us would be to reveal more to us of your conclusions. So, for example, for the longest time, I'm pretty sure it was classified that you had even concluded that. I think your public statements were the first time we ever were heard publicly that the FBI had actually made a conclusion. So even the conclusion was secret for a long time. Now, you had to have an analysis. You must have a paper sort of description of your thought process. We passed unanimously legislation to declassify this stuff. Most of this stuff doesn't need to be classified. A lot of those conclusions are just basically, had them out in the public, and we've been discussing this. But it would help the debate and maybe help us prevent something like this from happening again if you'd release your report. Are you going to declassify and release your report that allows you to conclude with moderate confidence that the virus came from the lab?
Well, I know my staff has been engaged with you directly on this, including the head of our WMD directorate, and I expect that to continue. I know you've asked for a number of documents that I believe we're getting ready to provide to you potentially as early as this week. As to what can be shared publicly as opposed to shared with you in your oversight capacity, that gets a little more complicated because sometimes the information is interwoven with other agencies' information we don't entirely control.
We don't want to know who your sources are. We want to hear your conclusions. We want to have what your scientists have looked at. And one of the specific things we asked them, they said they would be forthcoming with, and the meeting seemed to include cooperation, but then they just go dark on us. So, for example, one of the most important information from my point of view that suggests this came from Wuhan is that in 2018, the lab in Wuhan, along with a scientist at University of North Carolina, along with Peter Daszak, applied for money from DARPA. They wanted to create a coronavirus that had a cleavage site in it that's more commonly found in human viruses. They were denied the money, but that led us to thinking, and a lot of people thinking, wow, they were already asking for money to create a virus that has the same structure as COVID had. There apparently are other grants, and I've been trying to get the grants from government for 3 years. The most secretive organization in our government with regard to COVID is HHS and NIH. We pay for all their grants. None of their stuff's classified. They won't give us the stuff. But I think in your review, my guess is your people knew where to look, and I asked them, are there other grants like the Diffuse grant from DARPA that was denied that you can point us to, 4 or 5 other grants, so either given to them in Wuhan, denied to them in Wuhan, maybe given to another country somewhere around the world, but worried us that, and were circumstantial evidence leading us to the conclusion. Those things should be easy. They're non-classified. We can't get them from the NIH. If you've seen them, we just want you to help us because it needs to be public because our concern is this could happen again. There are scientists, legitimate, pedigreed virologists at major universities who believe not only that this came from this lab, but the next one could kill 5 to 50%. What if they're aerosolizing Ebola virus or Marburg virus or Nipah virus? This is as dangerous as nuclear weapons, but we've had only one side sort of interested in this so far. But if more information were revealed, maybe we can get both sides of the aisle interested and eventually do something to try to prevent this from happening again. And so if you will help urge them to give us some of the information and really figure out how to declassify stuff. I know most of intelligence is classifying and keeping secrets, but there's important public policy decisions that come from making it public. And do it in a smart way where you don't reveal things that you don't want to reveal, but I'm guessing 99% of the report probably already includes no classified information.
Well, we look forward to working with you on this. I'm very proud of the work our folks did here. It was rigorous, it was thorough, and for an awful long time, we were the only agency all by our lonesome reaching that assessment. And we will look forward to working with you as best we can. I will say that we continue to investigate, so there may be some issues that get wrapped up in that, but I know that our folks have found the engagement with your office to be productive, and we look forward to continuing that.
One really quick point, for those who doubt that this came from the lab, the FBI has concluded with moderate confidence. The Department of Energy, which has a lot of scientists, probably more scientists than any other part of our government, has concluded with low confidence. And the Lancet Commission, and the minority report from this, Bob Cadillac's report from this committee, a number of groups that spent a long time have come to the conclusion, not for partisan reasons, because we worry that this is going to happen again or could happen again. So I think we should try to all work together to see what we can do to restrain and restrict this type of dangerous research.
Thank you. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Mayorkas, I just have to put my chart back up here to rebut a point you made repeatedly, that it's our broken asylum system that has created this disaster at the border. The fact of the matter is, under the previous administration, we actually had brought illegal immigration down to 17,500 apprehensions, encounters per month. Last month, we hit over 270,000. And that was done under the previous administration with our same broken asylum system. The root cause of this disaster, literally, is President Biden and you. Now, Director Ray, I'm assuming you've seen and read the letter that Senator Grassley wrote to you and Attorney General Garland on October 24th?
I'm generally aware of it.
Oh, you ought to read it. Let me read some segments to you. The FBI maintained over 40 confidential human sources that provided criminal information related to Joe Biden, James Biden, and Hunter Biden. An essential question that must be answered in this: did the FBI investigate the information or shut it down? Certainly there's a host of reasons to conclude that they attempted to shut it down. It goes on. It has been alleged that the basis for shutting down the investigative activity, shutting it down, was an August 2020 assessment created by FBI Supervisory Intelligence Analyst Brian Auten. That assessment was used by FBI headquarters team to improperly discredit negative Hunter Biden information as disinformation and caused investigative activity to cease. It goes on. Analyst Brian Auten opened the aforementioned assessment, which was used by the Foreign Influence Task Force to seek out CHS holdings at FBI field offices across the country relating to the Biden family and falsely discredit them as foreign disinformation. My staff calls that catch and kill. And by the way, it was that same task force that gave Senator Grassley and I our unsolicited briefing that was later leaked to the media to smear me and impact my 2022 election. Senator Grassley concludes, there appears to be an effort within the Justice Department and FBI to shut down investigative activity relating to the Biden family. Such decisions point to significant political bias infecting the decision-making of not only the Attorney General and FBI Director, but also line agents and prosecutors. Our republic cannot survive such a political infection, and you have an obligation to this country to clear the air. Let me ask another, and by the way, I'd ask that this unanimous consent that this letter be entered in the record, and also this column that appeared in the Wall Street Journal published yesterday. Have you read this one? More on the stifled Hunter Biden probe.
I have seen that.
Okay. We'll enter that in the record. Again, this column is written based on the October 23rd Judiciary Committee interview with former U.S. Attorney Scott Brady, who was tapped by Attorney General Barr to vet information related to Ukrainian corruption and pass along credible material to offices with ongoing investigations. I'll get some highlights here. The FBI office in Pittsburgh couldn't take any steps without the review and approval of FBI headquarters. Mr. Brady describes a reluctance on the part of the FBI to really do any tasking related to allegations of Ukrainian corruption broadly, and then specifically anything that intersected with Hunter Biden and his role in Burisma. FBI headquarters had to sign off on every assignment, no matter how small or routine, and that this sometimes required 17 different people, mostly at the headquarter level. Mr. Brady said he'd never in his DOJ career seen anything like it. Mr. Brady says his office was informed by members of the Pittsburgh FBI team that they had been instructed by headquarters not to affirmatively share information with the Brady team. He said he was surprised to learn that the FBI possessed the Hunter Biden laptop since 2019. He heard that through public reports. Senator Grassley's letter concludes that he has obtained names from his whistleblower, 25 Department of Justice FBI personnel, to interview at a future date, and he's also requesting a bunch of information. Will you provide those FBI personnel for interviews with his office in mind, and will you provide those documents?
Well, I'll have to review the specific requests, and we'll see how we can be helpful.
Okay, well, I'll hand you this letter. Final point I want to make. I was briefed a couple weeks ago by members of the FBI on what Senator Blumenthal are doing to try and unredact a lot of the information on the 9/11 event, okay? Now, the briefers seem to be people of integrity, like I think the vast majority of the men and women that work in the FBI, the 38,000 field agents. So again, they were people with integrity. The problem is that they gave me 3 different examples of redacted and then unredacted to explain it. And the redactions made sense of those 3 examples, but I had to make the point. The problem I have is I simply cannot trust what the FBI is providing me. And I don't say that with any joy in my heart. That's a travesty. The American people want to believe and have trust in the FBI. We want credibility and integrity restored to your institution. But Director Ray, you have not done that since assuming office. And I could go through a long laundry list of the reasons why that trust has been violated. I don't have it right now. I'm happy to sit down and meet with you and go over these things in detail, but I would say, because they asked me, what can we do to restore trust? Start being transparent. My final point is, and this is actually a question, why is it, I mean, this makes no sense. I'm an elected U.S. Senator. I have the highest security clearance. Why is it that unelected members of the FBI can see the documents unredacted, but I can't, even in a secure briefing room? That makes no sense whatsoever, but that's exactly how federal law enforcement, Department of Justice, the FBI, who are the law, remain above the law, remain above scrutiny, and completely scorn our constitutional responsibility and authority to provide oversight. We just can't do it, as the chairman was talking about earlier, about how you've basically ignored his requests for credit for the, or requests for the record.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond?
You may.
So needless to say, I disagree with your characterization, not only of my own performance, but of our workforce. I will tell you, when it comes to trust and confidence, the number of people applying to be special agents of the FBI has gone up dramatically since I've been FBI director. And in fact, in your home state of Wisconsin, it's gone up about 160-something%, which is one of the highest in the country. So I see an FBI every day that conducts themselves with integrity and professionalism and selflessness and rigor. And I do not accept the characterization of our performance in this particular case.
That is not how I characterized it. I'm talking about partisanship
may I
at
finish,
the top
Mr. Chairman?
with some specific partisan actors. I said the vast majority of the 38,000 are people of integrity.
And the idea that I, as a Republican appointee and a lifelong Republican, am biased in the way that you are describing makes absolutely no sense.
I'm happy to read you chapter and verse of all the reasons why that credibility has been destroyed.